Thank you, sir. So without a lot of hesitation, I want to try to maximize as much time as you have since we have such an esteemed guest. You saw the bio from Robert earlier, but just to sort of recap it, Robert has been connected to Trinity for some time now, but his accolades go far and wide, as far as Australia, and as wide as all of Texas. Bad geographic joke. He's got nearly 30 years of experience inside of the beverage sector and just this wealth of expertise that I hope that we can all learn from and get his guidance on. He currently is at Accolade Wines as the Chief Executive Officer. Before that, he was the CEO of Treasury Wines in the States. When he left that, the press literally said it was a mistake and complimented his tenure into that space. He's a long-serving senior executive at Coca-Cola Companies, and we're going to have a great conversation today. But before we do, I'm going to hand it over to Robert, where he's going to give some of his insights as a business leader, the lessons that he has learned. And then at the very end of the class today, we're going to go into some Q&A. So if you can do me a favor, we're going to spotlight his video so that way it's better recorded for posterity in class later on. But please make sure that you're on mute. And Robert, thank you again so much for your time and making this a priority for the class. But please take it away, sir.
Well, thank you. And I want to thank everybody in the class for attending today. When Matt asked me to do this, I was very excited to do it. I've got a special place in my heart for Trinity. My oldest son went there, and we have a scholarship at Trinity that we funded. And one of my life goals, which actually not life goal, but in the next 5 or 10 years, is to get that up to $1 million of scholarship for Trinity students. And, Matt basically said to me, this is an entrepreneurial class, starting new businesses, etc. And he wanted me to, based on my 30 years experience in consumer products and, working for 4 different companies and moving around the world, kind of just give an overview of my experiences and learnings on that. And it is a very broad subject. So I'm going to move pretty quickly through this and would just ask maybe you write down in notes. I've got 5 sort of business side things and learnings for you. And I've got 5 personal things, because you'll find as you start working, whether you start your own company or whether you work for somebody else, that your work will be a big part of your life. And it's very hard to separate work and life. And when you kind of manage them together and bring them together in the right way, your life is a lot better. And Matt, this is a huge subject, and I'm totally happy to do other sessions after this if there's specific topics on this that people get most interested in. And we could almost do an hour on each of the 10 things, which is 10 hours. But so I'm going to run through it very quick, and at the end we'll do some Q&A. So on the business side, I just have 5 learnings for you. The first one is around whatever product or service that you're offering or that you're trying to offer in your new business. And really the learning for me is something called continuous improvement, or reiterative or repetitive improvement. And what you need to realize is whatever product or service you come out with initially, again, whether it's in your own business or whether it's part of a bigger business, it's not going to be very good. Once in a while, you'll do it and you'll get lucky, and it'll be better than you think it is. But whatever it is, over time, the real trick is to improve it over and over and over and get better on it. And, probably the best example of this is the iPhone, right? I mean, the iPhone, when it first came out, was a pretty crappy product. It was like, it didn't even have 3G. It didn't have much of a battery. It wasn't a very good product. And over time, Apple has reiterated, improved it, 1,000 times, and it's become a very good product. So it's that continuous improvement in that thinking about reiteration and getting consumer and customer feedback over and over and over on your product. The second business side learning for me is once you have a product and service, just as important as the product and service itself is the delivery mechanism, or how you actually get that to the consumer or the customer. And we like to call that our route to market. And you can have the best product in the world, but if you can't get distribution for it, or you can't get it on the internet in a way that reaches people, then that product will fail. And so as you think through, doing a new product or a new service and starting a new business around that, you've really got to think about the route to market and building an efficient route to market. And what's amazing to me in my experience is so many companies, even companies that should be good at that, aren't very good at the route to market piece and the distribution or the delivery of the product. And if you can think about that up front and the efficiency of it and how good it is and how to actually get your product in front of people, in a better way or more often, then you give your product a lot more chance to succeed. So that's kind of the second business side learning. The third one is, and this is really interesting, no matter what business you're in, it doesn't matter, service, product, whatever, everything is about people. Everything is about the team around the product, the team working on it, the team delivering it, the team delivering the customer service. And, when I go into a new business, the first thing I do is I get the team right. And the team has to be capable, experienced, but they've also got to fit into the culture that you want when you're driving something. Again, if you're in a business that's delivering a service, the team has to be not only capable of delivering that service, but capable of thinking about the customer all the time. So, the learning there, the third learning is that every business is a people business, and people is the key to doing what you're doing. And you'll find in startup, a lot of times as a kind of entrepreneurial, you're trying to do everything yourself. And eventually, at any point where you want to scale something, you've got to get help from other people. And that means the team has to be right and the people have to be right. And I always say, like for our business, which has 1,400 people and is a global company and it's worth $1 billion, our number one strategy is people. If we get the people right, then all the other things that I'm talking about in terms of, innovation or developing the right product or delivering it and route to market, all that stuff will come and follow. The fourth business learning, and this is kind of hard, I think, especially when you're young, to kind of understand. But again, if you write it down and think about it, I think it'll help you later, is plan for failure. A lot of times I think positive, optimistic people, they think I'm just going to go do this one thing and it's going to be successful. And the reality is, like in our business, 1 out of 10 new products works. So that's like a 10% hit rate. And I'm sure Matt can tell you, out of 10 new businesses started every year, maybe 1 or 2 might be successful. If you understand that, and you understand, it's kind of like when you're an actor and you go to 1,000 auditions and you get denied, 999 times, and then on the 1,000th time you're successful. If you kind of build that in, that no matter how good you are, no matter how well you think through a business plan or a business model, that you might fail or there's a probability you could fail, it helps you. It just helps you eventually becoming successful. And so plan for failure. And then the last kind of business side, and again, we could go over 15 or 20 business learnings, but I just want to pick 5, is always be consumer and customer centric. And that's kind of easy to say, but a lot of businesses are not like that. And even when you talk about a service business where you go and someone provides a service to you, think about a Starbucks, right? And you go in and they make coffee and they've got these coffee products. but what is the experience that you remember? It's the person you're actually talking to, the person that you're actually dealing with. And so if you're developing a product and you're going to get it to people, or you're developing a service, always think about that end consumer, or if you're selling it to a customer, that end customer. And if you always put them first, and always think about their needs and how to reiterate your product with them in mind, then much more likely to be successful. If you think about just yourself or your internal team or your internal problems or whatever, you're not going to win. You got to think about the customer and the consumer. So that's the fifth. And then, like I said, in business, we like to think of, we have the business life and then we have our personal life, and the two are kind of like this. Well, in reality, it doesn't work that way. And it especially doesn't work that way when you have to make money to make sure that you're not poor, or that you're not, trying to raise a family and you can't afford it and stuff like that. So I've got 5 kind of personal side things that as you go and you start doing the things that you're going to do, that also I think you really got to keep in mind. And the first one's probably the most important, which is know yourself. And I'll give you an example of that for me. When I started off and, kind of coming out of college, coming out of MBA, I always thought I want to start my own business. That's what I want to do. One day I don't want to work for anybody else. I want to start my own business. Well, after about 10 years, I kind of realized that while the idea of that is really neat and good, I actually don't have the kind of personality that can risk everything to start a new business. I just don't have that. And maybe it was because I grew up in kind of a lower middle class family, and we had 5 kids, and my parents did it, but they struggled to put us into, pay for college and all that stuff. I always wanted financial security in my family, and I never wanted that to be a risk. And I'm just using that as an example because me knowing that and understanding that about myself allowed me to define how much risk that I was willing to take in my life. So that's one thing. Know yourself. Do you really want to work 80 hours a week, or do you want to work 40 hours a week? Do you want to work for someone else, or you can only stand to do that for 5 or 10 years because you know yourself, and eventually you want to work on your own, and that's just the way it is. And you'd rather work, even if you made half amount of money, you'd rather work for yourself. Start learning all these things about yourself, and that's really important. The second one's kind of a corollary of know yourself, which is know your risk level. When are you willing to quit a job and go into a new venture? Are you willing to quit a job and go into another job, knowing that maybe after 3 months that job doesn't work out? Some people are very willing to do that. They don't look at it as a big deal. They always know another job's out there, and they're fine with that. So as part of knowing yourself, kind of know what your risk levels are. How much risk are you willing to take as you go through this journey? The third thing is actually more of a holistic kind of thing, and you've heard it. It's called balance. But I do believe, if you get in a situation as an entrepreneur and you're working 90 hours a week and you never see your family and you never have time to work out or exercise or this kind of stuff, you can lose your balance pretty quick. And you can wake up kind of 10 years later and say, geez, this isn't working for me, So, whatever choice you make in terms of how much you're going to work and how much you're going to travel and what you're going to do, as part of knowing yourself, I would suggest that you also have a plan to keep yourself healthy. Have a plan to work out every day in some form, even if that's a walk or a bike ride or a weightlifting or basketball or whatever. Have a plan for how you keep up with your family and friends and make some time for them, even if it's just on the weekends or whatever, all that stuff, because life moves by faster than you think. And you can find yourself kind of, geez, I did that last 10 years like that. I can't really remember any part of it. And it was just all work. And work is great. And working hard is very important. But you've got to, again, know yourself and kind of put it in the right perspective. The fourth thing is, I love the expression, it's a marathon, not a sprint. You know, you're not going to be like, oh, I'm successful and 5 years out, I have everything I need in life. And then that's it. Right. Your journey actually is going to be a 30, 35, 40-year journey of working. And therefore, you're going to have some really tough times. There'll be times when you get fired by somebody and you're like, well, that's kind of unfair. And I don't think that should have happened to me. There'll be times when maybe you have a good friend or a family member pass away unexpectedly. And all these things, in the playbook of life, no one ever kind of trains you to take care of those things or to be ready for them. But all I'm saying is that know that those kind of adversities are going to happen. Don't take them personal. Be strong, and play the long game. Any kind of investment that you can make in yourself, whether it be more education, another certificate, another job, which maybe is not perfect for you in the short term, but gives you certain skills that you need, all that kind of stuff. The example for me is when I left MBA, I worked in consulting for 2 years, and I kind of knew I didn't want to do consulting long term because it was just like 80 hours a week and travel and everything else. But I kind of made a pact with myself. Why don't I do this for 2 or 3 years? I'll learn as much as possible. And at the same time, I'll get my CPA and my CFA and my CMA. And so it was kind of like a little wrapped up pack for 2 or 3 years. But it was really the long game because, I don't even know. I didn't even really use the CPA that much after that. But like 10 years later or 15 years later, when I'm applying for GM roles or general management roles, people would say, oh, you've got a CPA as well. And I'd say, yeah, I got the CPA. And so that investment, even though it wasn't specifically something that I was going to do the rest of my life, I was playing the long game. I made those investments in myself, not only the certificate, the experience, whatever. And so don't ever get to a situation where you're like, today and how I live today and my life today and the work that I have today is the end all be all. It's not. It's all a journey that's building your skills, your personality, your capability over the long term. And you've got to build that resilience because you will have bad things happen to you. You will have unexpected things. You don't get the promotion that you wanted. You get fired. You do a new product and it completely fails. Those things will happen. Be ready for them. And the last thing I would say is, and again, this is a little bit harder when you're young, and I'm not saying you got to latch onto this right now too much, but the more that you can build some purpose into your work, like I'm working because I enjoy it or I'm trying to learn. I'm working because I need to make money. But also I'm working because I kind of want to get somewhere where I can help some other people or where I can build myself so that long term I can do this kind of stuff. The more that you can build purpose into your work and your personal life, the better you will feel and the better you will be when the times get tough. And you say, well, this year's been really difficult. The next year is going to be really difficult. But wow, I've got a purpose, 5-10 years out, and I'm working toward that. And that's fine. And then some years will be better than others. So those are the 5 kind of business things and 5 personal things. And, when I was your age in school, no one kind of told me those things. I kind of had to learn them as I go. And some of them I probably learned in the last 5 years, or 10 years when I was 45 years old or 50 years old. And I think if you can keep those things in sight and learn them early and keep them top of mind, a lot of the things you go through that'll be tough in your career, in your personal life, you can deal with. So that's kind of what I wanted to kind of present up front. And I'm more than happy to give you more examples of some of those things or, talk in more detail about specific examples or ways you can use those things to improve yourself. So Matt, hopefully that was helpful as a structure.
Yeah. Yeah. I'd love to dig in a little bit more. So like just to share a little bit about these sort of joint class, we have students that are in the complete ideation phase, right? Like they're just coming up with their ideas. They're just identifying problems. And then we have students that are a little bit past that, that they've got their core company that they're really starting to think about. They're doing market validation. They're trying to think about launching. And in my mind, entrepreneurship is not much different than entrepreneurship. So launching things, products, doing things inside of a company.
Absolutely.
If you were going to give somebody just like that first, like that primary tip, like every single time you're thinking about launching an idea, like what's the big advice you would have on interviews, on concept? Like what did you learn in your experience
Yeah.
to help launch an idea?
So that's a great one. So my experience is that actually getting interaction, data, and touchy feely with the product and service is much more important than the planning of it. Okay. And, the greatest example of that is SpaceX. Okay. SpaceX, from the very beginning, when they were building rockets, every single person who worked at the company was down in the dirt with the aluminum, actually designing and making the product, right? And again, uh, so it's actually not that hard to, if you're doing a service like you're saying, nowadays you can do internet, what are they called, monkey surveys or whatever, where you get all kinds of data from all kinds of different. So that's really important. If you're doing an actual product that's physical, reiterating it and trying it and looking at it and working with it and having people, in my business, it was always beverages, right? So, in the old days, you would design a package on a piece of paper, and then the package people would be an outside firm, and they would send you the final designs like 6 weeks later. And then, 6 weeks after that, you might get some mock-ups, et cetera, et cetera. The faster that you can, with $100 3D printer, work with the materials, get the mock-ups, get them in front of consumers, have them look at it and reiterate it, and get data on it, that's going to make all the difference. And so ask yourself again, am I really, when I say consumer and customer centric, I'm not saying in terms of like just at a planning phase. I'm talking like actually get in front of customers and consumers and interact with them and get that product and that service back and forth. If you're doing a new internet site, get it up and running and piloting as quickly as possible. We did a kind of intranet site for a whole company. Our old intranet site was horrible. And I think we put together the site in 3 weeks, and then we had 100 users on it for the next 3 weeks. So it was just all very fast. And within kind of 90 days, we launched the site, and it was groundbreaking in 90 days. Under the old model, we never would have been able to do that with someone outside doing it. And then, have as much of it inside as you can, reiterating it, getting in front of consumers and customers, getting as much data and feedback as you can. And with the internet and with the way things work these days, it doesn't cost a lot of money. That's the most amazing thing. Building rockets costs some money, but building other kind of products and ideas doesn't cost a lot of money as long as you're fast and you reiterate.
I love that. And we use the lean canvas, lean principles as part of the fundamentals of these two classes. What are like some other just like core fundamental truths that you've experienced, whether it's in the beverage industry, it's in teaching at Rice or Trinity? Like, as you've grown as an entrepreneur, what are some like just hardcore fundamental truths that are true for every single industry?
Yeah, the other truth for me is that the real work, honestly, happens in extremely small teams, like 3 or 4 people. And you can have these teams of like, and I know in your environment they're probably already small, but when you get out in the real world, when I was at Coke, we'd have like these meetings of 30 people, and to be honest, nothing happens in those meetings. There's just some information thrown out and some data and stuff like that. The real work happens when you get 3 or 4 of the right people together and they're able to reiterate, think, and push things along. And that's, I think that philosophy is true in any industry. And again, I would recommend people, because again, a lot of the people in this class, they'll probably go to work in businesses first rather than, their own kind of business with a small group, and always keep that small team principle. I mean, you're not trying to cut people out, but the core of the work with 3 or 4 people can get done. And then, the bigger teams can be part of that as you go. So that's probably a big thing. The other thing is, I would say is, I'll go back to the plan for failure, because, and you probably at some point in your class should probably just grab have a student or yourself, or maybe you already have them, grab some statistics on how many new businesses fail percentage wise, and how many new products, like pick a category, beverages in the United States, how many new products are launched every year and how many succeed. And the percentage rate's really small. It's under 10% usually in my experience. And we think on MPD, probably we're going to be at a 5 or 6% hit rate. And no one ever taught me that. When I always thought, well, if I did a new product and it failed, then I'm just not that smart, or I must be stupid, But I think if you can build that into your thinking and how you approach things, it's always better to, you need to have the vision and the optimism, but you need to have the reality too. And if you're grounded in that and understand, you can better weigh the risks and how to move forward, and how to, reiterate and change what you're doing quickly if you need to.
Yeah, I just recently wrote something. I'm speaking with Enterprise Ireland on Friday, and we did some stats, and I just copied from the report in 2019. According to the research we did, 90% of startups fail, 21.5% startups fail in the first year, 30% in the second year, and 50% in the fifth year, with 70% in their 10th year. So definitely an uphill battle. And Robert, we're talking about failure rates, right? What's the value of trying something and failing?
The value, the value is, if you don't try, you're not going to succeed. But also it's a good point. The more you go through that failure, the more you learn. And the more you kind of get that kind of specific knowledge for your industry and where you're working, but also personally for yourself in terms of how things work. And, with my kind of 30 years experience now in beverages, I can kind of have a sense for whether a product's going to work or not pretty quick. But even then, I might be moving the success rate up from 6% to 15%. I'm not moving it from 6 to 90%, but I am improving the probability. And so, and given what you said about failure rates and what I said, you're going to have to try 10 times to probably get a success, or try 6 times to get a success in one way or another. It may be the same company and it may kind of pivot or do something different. And so I think, the biggest risk in life is doing nothing. Honestly, that's the biggest risk. And that's the biggest risk for a business. And our competitors in wine, I see them as being so slow and really it's almost like a turkey shoot, because we try lots of things and we're not afraid to fail. And that's just because we're, I guess, more confident and have more experience, and come out of different industries. And that ultimately leads to more success. There's no doubt about it.
I love it. And Bradley has messaged me. He's got a question for you. So Bradley, if you want to unmute yourself.
All right, I was typing in the chat, but I didn't finish in time. So for someone who wants to be an entrepreneur, business leader one day, but doesn't have like the business skills yet, what types of jobs or opportunities should they look for to gain those fundamental business skills? Like, for example, you said your career and your time in consulting, but for those of us that are still students, what should we be looking for with internships and starting jobs that'll give us that foundation for a long career?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think if you look at the fundamental pieces or functions of entrepreneurship in order to be successful in the types of things that we're talking about, marketing, finance, supply chain, and probably digital savviness. Any experiences you can get in any of those areas, I think are going to help you later. And it's kind of hard to say, well, okay, well, to get finance experience going to banking, that's not really what I mean. But what I do mean is, if you think you're interested in a certain industry, when you go in that industry, you can actually, what I found is you can actually expose yourself much broader than your job title is. And when I started in consumer products, I started in finance. And that's because that's what my degree was in, and all my certificates, and it was kind of like a good entry point. So I started off at the Coca-Cola company as a senior financial analyst, right? But I very quickly decided I didn't want to just do finance. And I almost kind of, in a way, when I was on projects, I started getting involved in all the other aspects of the projects in addition to the finance. Now, to do that, you got to do the finance pretty well and then, get involved in the other. But I think given you're in a class like this, it comes down to your own curiosity and your own willingness to, learn new things. So, long answer to your question, I actually think any kind of internship or job can be great. It's about you expanding what you learn in there and getting as much exposure as you can to finance and marketing and supply chain and all those things, and continuing. And then as you go, you can, I mean, when I was in finance, I could take marketing courses and learn more about marketing. And that's what I did. I read books about marketing. I can't remember if I took courses, but I hung around marketing people and talked to them about marketing. So you can do all that, and start to become a more rounded person, because that's what's key. When ultimately you're really an entrepreneurial, you kind of understand all aspects of what you're doing.
Thank you.
And we have another question from Carson.
Yeah, I'd love to hear you talk more about like delegation. Like we're working on our startup right now, and like kind of like one of the toughest things is like figuring out what everyone like needs to be doing, what everyone's good at. And so I'd love to like hear how you kind of maneuvered that.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. And it's probably different in your environment than it is for me, because I'm the CEO, I can handpick my direct reports. And so I have 9 direct reports, or 9 people who directly report to me, and then they have other people reporting to them. And I fired 6 of them and hired 6 replacements, because one of the things we have as a management team, because we're moving so fast and we're in growth mode and we're acquiring businesses and we're doing all these things, I can't babysit people and I can't do their job for them. So there's a level of trust, I would say. And the more trust you have, the more you can delegate things and not worry about them so much, right? And the less trust you have, the less you can delegate and the more you have to worry about things. I would say in your situation, because you're working fast in a short period of time, I think it's great to delegate things, but you probably need frequent check-ins, because different people are going to have different skill sets and different time frames. And so you can delegate something, and then you need a pretty regular check-in. And then let's say after a week, something that's been delegated is not being done properly, then the group can help get it done or redelegate to someone else. So, in my situation, because I know all the people, I can delegate, and, I might choose to check in on a weekly basis, or I might choose to check in a month later, but it's only because of that trust. So I think you've got to balance that trust and control, not control, trust and check in to make sure that the work's being done and can be redelegated or redone if it's not getting done. And so regular check-ins is the way I would handle your delegation.
Thank you.
To build off that, Robert, I'm super curious. We use Strengths Finders as a tool for our classes. How do you pick your team? What's the best principle or the best tool or mechanism you've used to build and develop your team?
Did you say to pick the team or to develop them?
Both, either one, right? I don't think there's a right or wrong given kind of where they're at.
Yeah, I mean, to pick my team, to be totally honest with you, I use my experience and I kind of know what I need now. So this is kind of like my last job, so I know exactly what I need. But I think if I was earlier in my career and I wanted to pick the team, I think you got to be real specific on what you want and what you need. And then you got to really ask questions and do references with other people on whether they meet those needs and stuff like that. Now, as far as working together, and we don't use like we don't really use like Slack and all this kind of stuff. We use obviously a lot of email, text, all that kind of stuff. But we try and simplify things as much as possible because things become very complex very quickly. So in a way, in Amazon, they say they start every meeting with a 1-page or 2-page Word document. And they say, if you can't put it on 1 or 2 pages, then you're not going to have an effective meeting, right? We don't do that, but I kind of like that philosophy, which is if you come in with a 100-page deck and it's just all over the place, it's going to be very difficult to have a conversation and drive what you're doing. I think you can very simply on 1 or 2 pages in most situations, write down the things that teams really need to work on and drive. And so keeping that kind of 1 or 2 page, and then you update it as you go. That's the way I like to work and get things done. Because you can have any level of kind of strategy and any level of detail on those 1 to 2 pages that you need.
Wonderful. And Lucy in chat just asked a question. Given that people are constantly saturated of advertisement and social media, et cetera, how have you seen marketing advance progress to get people in a more efficient way?
That's a great question. When I started in FMCG, it was really simple. You bought TV advertising and you had chunks of it and all that. That's all gone now. It's crazy. When I talked about distribution and route to market, to be honest, that's our number one marketing program. Well, for us, okay, we sell a product. Obviously, we either sell it online, but most of our product is sold in a supermarket, a hypermarket, a bottle shop, or a convenience store. Okay. And because I came out of Coca-Cola, I was lucky I was trained on this, but I'm trained to look at every single part of the market as its own channel. So convenience stores, and then look at every customer and every store in that. And how do you drive your product there and get it on the shelf? And for us in the wine business, it's such a great question, what you said. We actually don't have big marketing budgets. And the key to us is to get our product on the shelf. So the marketing that we do is mainly to get the customer to put the product on the shelf. And so the learning there is understand, what your lever is to get the product in front of the consumer. That's the key. And for some products, that'll be, digital media on Instagram and ads. For other products, it'll be finding the right distributor and giving them the right tools and understanding the end customer. And for other products, it might be something totally different. So it's such a great question. It's going back and being customer and consumer centric. That's the key. That drives your marketing plan. There's no textbook you read and say, oh, I can just do this advertising or this digital or whatever. When you become customer and consumer centric, you find the marketing to spend on your product to get it out there.
I just want to highlight, because all of y'all are starting to play with lean canvases or are pretty advanced in it. The pattern that Robert just laid out was customer, then channel, then key metrics, almost to a T. So if you were really playing with this, if you're thinking about this, if you come back to this recording and because you're stuck in the lean canvas, literally what we just went through was that part of it. So I just want to highlight that. Robert, we got another question, someone who wanted to stay private. Your background, I may have inspired them, but what would you say is essential reading or an essential book for personal and professional?
Oh man, I have so many of them. If I had to say one book, there's a Elon Musk book by Vance. Do you know which one I'm talking about?
Yeah, I'm going to see if I can find it real quick to put in the
That
chat for everybody.
that's an inspirational book. And again, it's someone changing whole industries who has no experience in the industries. It's someone getting things done that no one ever thought they could get done. And it's also a story of multiple failures, you know, almost going into bankruptcy twice, you know, I mean, literally a week away from bankruptcy twice. Of course, I'm talking about Tesla and Elon Musk. Again, that's kind of, I've also read some good, I think Charles Schultz, Howard Schultz's first book on Starbucks was really good. It was all about the customer. It was all about making the product for the customer. I think that's a great book. I thought his second book was okay, but his first book, Pour Your Heart Into It, I think was awesome. There's one other thing that I forgot to put on here, which I want to make sure I capture. Take a public speaking course. Public speaking will be one of the most important things you do, whether you're sitting in front of someone, you know, a new investor and trying to convince them to put money in your company, whether you're sitting in front of a customer and you're telling them how great your product is, or whether you're sitting in front of 50 employees and you know you can't make payroll next week, but you know you want them to stick with you. Public speaking is one of your top skills. And I go back to Warren Buffett said, you know, Warren Buffett, I think did he go to Yale? I can't remember. And he took a class from Benjamin Graham, right? The great value investor. And he said his best, most important course in all his investment was public speaking, the Andrew Carnegie public speaking course. If he had not taken that, he would not have become Warren Buffett. I think that's crazy, right? Because you think, well, no, he learned about value investing and that was all. And he was in an office and just making investments. No, he was communicating and figuring out how to raise money and how to put it into his ideas. And that's public speaking. So that's another one that your skill set you've got to get. And public speaking is really funny. There's not one person I know who likes to do it when they first start. I mean, I hated it. I absolutely hated it. You know, I'd get up and like, you know, just horrible. Once you take a course and you get through it, it's actually really easy and you get on with it. You always have a little bit of like nerves before a speech, but it gets much easier.
We got time for one more question. Who wants to be brave and ask the last question of the night? I love trying to put people. Corbin, give it to me.
So you mentioned that the phrase again, it's a marathon, not a sprint, as far as sort of a life being a really long road, not really a one fast track to success. And I'm hearing mention of public speaking courses and classes and jobs that kind of train you on the business skills and everything along the way. Maybe where do you place each of those on the marathon? What are the kind of things that are good to get out of the way really early? And what are the kind of things you need to wait for?
That's a great question. The answer is actually everything early, but it's a great question. And I'll give you exactly a situation. So when I came out of MBA and I looked at it and I go, I'm going to do the CPA and the CMA and the CFA. And the CFA is like a 3-year deal, you know, and it's something that only investment bankers have and analysts. And so there's no way based on my career path that I was going that I was ever going to quote need a CFA, right? I said to myself, you know what, I'm 22 or 23. I could actually do all 3 of these in the next year and a half, 2 years or 3 years. if I wait till I'm 28 and I've got a kid at home and I'm doing a job, I ain't going to do it. So that's an example where I kind of prioritize that for that couple of years. So I think, you know, one of the other things that I would recommend in your career and in your life is always think in terms of, you know, the next week, the next month, the next 6 months, the next year, the next 5 years, the next 10 years, the next 30 years. Sounds kind of funny, but when you train your mind to think like that, you can actually have buckets of things and they can kind of move with you. And that'll help you do that. So I would say, you know, the education piece, the courses, the certificates, front load all that as much as you can. Because later on when you're 30, 35, you know, 40, you're just not going to want to do it. The health stuff, working out, I would say that's just continuous. You know, if you can work out half an hour a day doing something for the rest of your life, you're going to have a better life. You're going to have more energy. You're going to have a healthier life. You're going to be better off. You know, the job skills is kind of interesting because it takes a lot of investment. I mean, if you say for 2 years, I want to get some financial skills and I want to kind of work in this kind of job, that's a lot, you know, that's in your current life, that's a hell of a long time, 2 years, right? In the scheme of things, it's actually not that long because it's 2 years out of 30 years, right? So I think if you just kind of keep that in mind and the key thing is always be making some progress. So if you find yourself after a year saying, you know, I really didn't learn anything the last year, I don't have any more certificates, I don't have any more, you know, it's time to, you know, double down and do some of that stuff. So that probably doesn't answer all your question, but if you kind of think that way, it'll kind of fall into place as you go.
Robert, this has been great. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We will have this recorded for everybody to come back to. There's some real nuggets in here as you're thinking about your pitches and link canvases. And for those of you competing in Stumberg, I would 100% tell you to come watch this again. Robert, is there any final thoughts, anything else, any words of wisdom you want to share for the class as they go on and launch their journey?
The only thing I would say is be incredibly happy about where you are today. The fact that you're at Trinity in a class like this, you're already in the top 1% of the world in terms of your opportunities, your future, what you have, you know, you're already there, and just be really appreciative of that and make the most of it, you know, and don't be too hard on yourself. Again, you will fail, you will get fired, you know, you will do things wrong. You know, I've had some mess ups, you know, early on with an expense report or this or that. You know, stay the straight arrow, take the long game, hold your head up, be confident, but really appreciate where you are now and enjoy it while you have it, and have a great future. And I'm Matt, I'm more than happy to come back at any time.
Absolutely. We'll definitely take a look and see what we can do. And I have shared your bio and information with the class too. So you may be getting a bunch of new LinkedIn friends here in the next couple of days too.
Great. If you invite me on LinkedIn, I'll definitely accept you. And I definitely want to copy this recording too.
We'll make sure to get that to you. So without further ado, 2112, you have an assignment due tonight. Hopefully you know what that is. And the traction side, and if you have questions, let me know. 2111, we will be back at our regularly scheduled time. Thank you all so much for being here. Robert, thank you again for prioritizing this, and the students. It means a lot.
My pleasure. Anytime. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you.